oh man, it's just such a beautiful notion of thinking about this idea of faith as being groundedness, as
Hmm.
being solidity, as being oriented. The word faith having a fundamentally agentic, yeah,
Mm.
like turning in the word meaning, like moving it from the semantic domain
Hmm.
into the notion of means to an end, right? That faith is something about that which is a well-founded, um, reliable means to an end.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, you think about it, like if you kind of transposition in that direction, a like a basketball player,
Hmm.
a truly masterful basketball player, you've seen certain circumstances when they shoot the shot and they just turn around and walk away
Hmm.
because they know well before the ball has hit the hoop that it's going in.
Yeah.
That's faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's the faith of the master knowing that their tool will do what the tool is intended, that their will carry itself out in the world with artistry, um, and a certain elegance because the competence is just there. Like they just know.
Mm.
That feels to me like that's getting in the right direction. How's that landing for you?
Um, I like parts of it, and I want to sort of open up other parts of it. Because the thing that concerns me in what you said, let me say what concerns me, and then let me say what I liked, what landed for me. What concerns me is part of that historical narrative was also the shift with Luther, right? And you get the shift um, towards sort of willful assertion that um, and that God is also a purely willing agent, willing in the sense not of wanting, but of actively enforcing his will on the world. The will imposition notion. Uh,
Yeah, I hear you.
and so, and we know some of the dangerous offshoots of this, which is the idea of faith as sort of, almost a magical will imposition of your will on the world. You'll just sort of will the world to be what you want it to be. And I don't think you want to put your finger on that. I don't think you want to say that because I know what we've discussed before.
Yeah.
So, so there's,
So let me try
yeah,
and try another metaphor that comes to my mind as you're talking, and they both have to do with water. So one has to do with the notion of a kayak in the river, and the other one is a surfer on a surfboard.
yeah, yeah,
And I think there's a really big distinction between a surfer who really has this sense that he is going to out paddle the ocean, that
yeah,
his will is the thing, right? And that it's a matter of almost like a brutal forcing of mastery on the natural environment. The
right,
ocean's a great example because in most cases, that just straight up isn't going to happen. To be a good surfer is first and foremost to have learned that lesson,
yeah,
that primarily your responsibility is sensitivity, to be aware of the flows that you're enmeshed in.
right, right,
And
right,
then there's something about your choice is like a trim tab in the Bucky Fuller sense. It's
right,
a
right.
there's an opening, there's a place where your choice makes a difference,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that your will has a place in the larger context,
Sure.
and that then faith is this sense of like being held. And in surfing, it literally is called being in the pocket.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
To literally be to know how to sense what's happening around you and to respond to what's happening in a way that you are held in the pocket. It's a very wu wei sensibility.
Right. Right.
That's what I'm talking about in that direction.
Okay. That's very much in line with what I was thinking when I was trying to propose this idea of this dynamic sense of continuity of contact with an unfolding process, which of course is exactly what's happening in the surfing
Yeah.
metaphor. And then there's you brought in an extra dimension, which you often do wonderfully with your visualizations. I love the way you do that, by the way. We'll be articulating something conceptually. You'll bring it into a visual metaphor, and then the visual metaphor unfolds, unpacking something in the phenomenology that isn't immediately referenced in the concept, because you brought up this idea of like the pocket and finding the sweet spot, right?
It's nice
Right.
to talk to you again, by the way. It's been too long.
Yeah, I agree. I like it a lot too. Um, and so I like that I like I because being a martial artist, Tai Chi Chuan and stuff like that. There,
Hmm.
like, it's part of it's of course getting into a flow state, but part of it's also getting into like you said, getting into the pocket. So I take it that like there's a normativity to faith, if you'll allow me. Like you can do it better or worse. You can think of the surfer, maintaining sort of a continuity of contact with the wave, but they're sort of clumsy, right? And then the one who gets, if you'll allow me a term I've been working on, gets an optimal grip on the situation, right? And they find that reciprocity with the world, right? So there's that deep sort of at one-ment, and then they have a sense of, right? And it's not something even with the power of a skill. I would say that it's a knowing at a much deeper level. You know that you have this sense of a deep kind of conformity and at one-ment with things that gives you the sense that you're in that sweet spot with respect to how something is unfolding. Is that part of what you're putting your finger on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like the fact that you highlight that notion of at-one-ment, because it is definitely my first person experience of when I'm in those circumstances. Like, is that sense of sort of a dropping away and an extension and a sensitivity. And of course, the classic example is that the moment that you are aware of it, or you're thinking about it, or you get in your head, you're not in it anymore.
Right.
And that's important, right? In the context of this notion of propositional.
Well, that's exactly right. So there's two things I want to talk about there. One is exactly that, because I'm really interested, as you know, in dialectic and how it affords dialogos. I'm interested in about this interplay between dropping in, I'll use your metaphor because it's a good one, and then maybe I'll use my metaphor, stepping back and looking at, and right, and that there's a kind of higher order place you can get there too.
Yes.
That's got its own sweet spot, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Completely. In fact, I just had the first person experience. So there's like a middle spot that's a bad place that drops you out of both. And there's this really interesting thing where you're like actually in both of those places, and they really do support each other.
Yes. And that's a kind of faith in dialectic that you see in the Platonic dialogues. I'm reading a really good book. I can't remember the name of the author. His name starts with an R. Ralkowski, I think. I might be getting it wrong. It's Heidegger's Platonism. Guy sent it to me. And he's unpacking this whole thing, that because Plato thought that ultimately there's a deep kind of faith in dialectic in Plato. Because Plato argues that when you're doing this process, you ultimately can't put it into words, which sounds odd for dialectic, right? But his whole point is you do this so something catches fire, right, that is ultimately non-propositional. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want. There is a normativity. There is this guiding.
Massively.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, again, yeah, absolutely. And it's beautiful. It's like you could say maybe even like this notion of conformity, that there is a shape. There is a shape to it. There is a shape. That's all there is to it. If you don't grab a ball like this, then you are not going to be successful in holding the ball. Like if you hold it like this, it's going to slide off your hand. Like as simple as that.
That's the optimal gripping again. The dynamic optimal gripping. So that brings me to kind of the other point I wanted to. We don't have to get to it immediately, but I want to try and situate that in terms of, again, the religion that's not a religion. This idea, because I want to add one more dimension to it.
Absolutely. Very powerful. Yeah, I'm seeing it unfold in real time, actually.
Okay, great. Because the one more thing I would want to add to that, which I think is implicit, especially if the surfer, right, is getting an optimal grip on a continually shifting situation, is the surfer is also going through some kind of transformative process. Now, in the surfing situations, it's transformation of their skill set and their sensitivity. But what we're talking about, I think, when we're talking about the religion that's not a religion, is a much more profound and comprehensive transformation. And so my question is, for discussion is, taking this notion we're starting to craft of faith, but then saying, but what does that look like when it's a faith that's going to take you through this much more comprehensive and profound transformation? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me just try to throw something out that occurs to me. Okay. And I apologize that this is a little bit too topical, but I'm going to use the coronavirus or
no, that's fine.
The unfolding meta crisis, as I'm referring to it, because you have to think about a lot of stuff besides just the virus.
Yeah.
In this context of faith, in this context of religion.
Yeah.
And it's really quite fascinating, actually. It's almost like a mirror reflection of the Black Plague.
Yes, you and I talked about this last time. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's what's going to happen. at least in some places, in some context, is that some people will take faith in the sense that we're talking about, which is to say that they will find a way to come into a, how do you say it, a dynamic conformity?
Yeah, yeah.
With what is really unfolding.
Yep, yep.
Which is to say that they will make good choices. Yep. They will make choices that are right in relationship to the reality that they find themselves in, and to who they are, right? The place that they are at, in relationship to themselves, to their own bodies, to the people who they are with, the relationships that they are near, and in fact, in extending it. And if you find this is happening in real time, for example, in many, many communities around the world, where they're beginning to realize that a lot of the help that they need will only and can only be found among the people who they are nearby.
Right, right.
And to the degree to which and what I'm saying is that that's actually a discovery of what is in fact actually real. That's a reality. It is simply the reality that in a context like this, to be able to rely on your neighbors is a good strategy. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And to be able to be relied on by your neighbors is a good place to be.
Yes.
Trustworthy. And by the way, non-trivial. Yeah, all these things, exactly. Good faith, competence, integrity, trustworthiness, all these sort of things that are old school virtues for good reasons, as our friend Jordan Peterson sort of famously tried to hammer into the consciousness. And that is a coming to faith, right? That building of an actual capacity to do so, right? Not the hope that it exists, but the learning, the relearning, and in many ways it's the rediscovery of what it means to be able to have integrity, and what it means to be able to have trustworthiness, and how to do so across a larger group of people, like how to be a neighbor, to be neighborly, and to be a good neighbor in the context of crisis is an embodiment of this faith that we're talking about,
right,
in a larger fashion, right, among a larger body. And the beautiful thing about the environment that we're in right now is that it has this beautiful the constants between salience and relevance. We are forced to make choices.
Yeah.
And we find out very quickly whether the basis of choice was a good basis of choice.
Right.
And it has meaning. It lands, right? There are consequences.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of an optimal learning environment for building faith. I'm really enjoying this, by the way. I really like the idea of being able to recover this notion so well, so deeply from
me too.
From the false narrative that has presented it as being kind of maximally maladaptive.